The Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan
is resign Tayyip. That's the Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Turkey's Prime Minister has issued a defiant message to anti-government protesters after a second day of clashes in the country. These are the live pictures we can bring you now from Istanbul in Turkey. You can see protesters there gathering. That crowd has grown significantly over the last couple of hours. It's now just coming up to 20 to 5 local time in the afternoon there in Turkey. We've already seen water cannon being deployed, tear gas volleys also being seen from both sides, being the police and the protesters as well. The Prime Minister has conceded that perhaps there has been some extreme cases of police action and perhaps too much gas being used, but he's still going ahead with this crackdown on protesters. The unrest all began yesterday in Istanbul's Taksim Square. Protesters there have been staging a sit-in over plans to build a shopping centre on the site of a park. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has vowed the project will go ahead, as I just said. There have also been more demonstrations today in the capital, Ankara. Stephen Douglas has our report.
At first light, hundreds marched on Istanbul. They blocked one of the main bridges into the city, a city already battered by rioting. It didn't take long before the situation escalated once again, both here and in the capital, Ankara. The police have responded with water cannons. Here the man on the left of the screen is blown off his feet.
Definitely there are people of all kinds of ideology here together, from all religious sects. But the attitude of the police never changes.
Violent protests spread across Istanbul overnight. This was how Turkish riot police responded to some of the biggest anti-government protests in years.
Now we begin in Istanbul, where protests continue into the night. The demonstrators have taken over Istanbul's central Taksim Square, where they started fires demanding the government's removal. Earlier, some activists reportedly tried to break through police blockades, aiming to storm the Prime Minister's office. The violence was sparked after a local rally and was brutally dispersed by police there. Let's take a closer look at the scene that we have witnessed in the last 2 days. We saw a swelling police presence in the city on Saturday, with riot police numbers seemingly matching those of protesters. Water cannons have been used to disperse the demonstration. The amount of tear gas used against the crowds has reportedly seen around 1,000 people seek medical help. Pepper spray and rubber bullets were also used to clear the streets of angry campaigners. Over 50 people have been wounded and more than 900 have been arrested across the country. RT's Irina Glushka has been following the unrest.
Most of the roads have been blocked off, so I had to walk quite some way to my hotel. And I've seen people who have also been arriving from the airport along with me would pick up their suitcases, and then somebody who would be meeting them would give them the masks so they could continue on their way to the hotel, but wouldn't have to suffer. Basically, you can smell this tear gas almost everywhere, and it gives you this sort of peppery feeling in your throat. This is all a result of protests that have been going on in Istanbul. People started off with a sit-in in the Taksim Square, where the government planned to raise down a park. The sit-in was dispersed by police who used tear gas. After they did it, the several dozen people that were there in the first place were replaced with hundreds upon hundreds, which turned into thousands of people in the same place in the square who were protesting. But this time they were not protesting just the government's decision to get rid of the park. They were protesting the government altogether. People that I have spoken to say the park was just something that set off a major event. The park was just an excuse for them to finally pour out on the streets of Istanbul and let their opinion.
Protests in Turkey have spread from Istanbul to the capital Ankara. Police have fired tear gas and water cannon in both cities, with dozens of people reported injured. Well, the clashes started when police cleared a 4-day sit-in in Istanbul's Taksim Square. Well, protesters there were opposing a plan to demolish a popular park. But the demonstration soon widened into a broader protest against the Prime Minister and his Islamist-rooted Justice and Development Party. Jody Sabril reports.
Dramatic scenes in Istanbul on Friday. Anti-government protesters clashed with police in the city's main shopping district. Tear gas and water cannon were used against the protesters. Clashes then spread to the capital, Ankara, and other cities around the country. Tensions have been growing over the past 4 days. What began as a peaceful sit-in over plans to demolish a popular park ended in violent clashes after police used tear gas against sleeping protesters in a dawn raid on Friday. The plans to replace the park with a shopping mall have been controversial from the outset. Prime Minister Erdogan has said the regeneration project will continue no matter what.
The attacks are still continuing. He is not listening to anyone. He acts as if he is an Ottoman sultan. He is trying to install his own dictatorship.
New restrictions on alcohol sales and attacks on freedom of speech have many from Turkey's pro-secular society saying that their civil liberties are under threat. This latest crackdown in Turkey's largest city will likely make these voices louder. Jody Sabril, BBC News.
This is an extremely informative report we're hearing from you and your guest. Let me ask you, though, about the Turkish military. A huge force in Turkey for many, many years, traditionally. Any indication of what is going through their minds at the moment? Protesters and riot police fight in the streets of Istanbul for a second day today. What started out as rallies against the destruction of a local park has rapidly grown into a major protest against the government. It has spread to other cities in Turkey as well. Demonstrators say the government is intent on turning their secular Muslim country into an Islamist state. CNN's Ivan Watson joins us now live from the streets of Istanbul. Ivan, what is the scene there today and how does it compare to yesterday?
Well, this was the scene of about 24 hours of clashes, Fionnuala, starting from Friday through dawn on Saturday. The ground here still littered with the stones and bottles that were hurled by demonstrators against riot police. The clashes are continuing in Istanbul. These are the worst anti-government riots we've seen in more than a decade in Istanbul, and they have, as you mentioned, spread to other cities like Ankara and Izmir. What started as a protest against the demolition of a park, a shopping mall, has led to protests against the government of the Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan and accusations that his police have made excessive use of force. He gave a speech to Turkish television on Saturday conceding that there probably was an excess in the use of tear gas and that would be investigated. But he insisted, quote-unquote, marginal groups cannot come to this central square in Istanbul. I'm hearing tear gas fired in the distance, police helicopters overhead, and police still preventing demonstrators from being able to gather here for protests. Now,
Dorian Jones, and Dorian, you were there last night as things got a little bit heated, and it is, as we were hearing, continuing today. Just give us a sense of quite how the tensions were last night. Anodyne, didn't it, as a sort of protest about the redevelopment of a green area in Istanbul, and it suddenly sort of escalated into what's being described as the creeping Islamisation of the government.
Well, that's right. I mean, for several days, the government want to turn there's this small park in the centre of the city, one of the few remaining parks, and they want to turn it into a shopping mall. And for several days, there have been a sit-down protest to protect the trees. It's been very peaceful. Many people brought their children. There was I saw a mother with her baby. It was extremely peaceful. But then the police decided, following only a few hours after the Prime Minister said that dismiss the protest, saying these people can do what they like, but we've decided following that speech, the police moved in using a lot of gas, water cannon, and a lot of people were injured. A wall collapsed, injuring many people. A member of parliament that was attending had his shoulder badly injured from a gas cylinder that was fired at him. And this led to an outpouring of anger that I haven't seen for many, many years. At the severity of the violence. I mean, the center of the city is very popular with tourists. There are many cafes where tourists were sitting, and they too were gassed. The metro station, that too was gassed. And to compound that, they closed the doors of the metro station, trapping people inside with the gas. And this really has caused a great deal of anger in the country. And it's fed into this feeling that the country, the Prime Minister is acting in an increasingly authoritarian way. Any kinds of dissent is being met by increased brutality by the police. And at the same time, last week, the Prime Minister rushed through legislation with very little debate, introducing sweeping controls on alcohol. The Prime Minister comes from political Islam. His party is Islamic rooted, and that has fueled into concerns that the Prime Minister, with a massive majority in Parliament, is now taking the country in a direction that many people are very uncomfortable with. Having said that, the Prime Minister does have massive support in the country. His party is way ahead in the opinion polls, in part because of the weak opposition. But this protest, which is very apolitical, it's not party political, has fed into this deep reservoir of concern over the country's direction and the actions of the police.
But the government are stressing that they are committed to Turkey's secularism. You know, it is a secular state, and the government trying to distance itself from those criticisms.
Well, yes, I mean, the party has been in power for a decade, and they say that the secular state is still there, very healthy. People can do as they wish. And the Prime Minister said that the majority can never pressurize the minority. He said that today, and where at the same time he said the minority cannot dictate to the majority. And there is that tension in Turkey. Turkey is a predominantly Muslim country. The Prime Minister's won 3 successive elections with landslides, and he says he does speak on behalf of the people. But having said that, in the last few months, there does appear to be a ratcheting up of an agenda that does seem to cause growing concern among secular people in the country. And it's also this question of not tolerating dissent. Many protests now that are peaceful are being cracked down heavily, in particular the use of gas.
The crowd here is chanting Tayyip istifa. That means the Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
And CNN's Ivan Watson is joining us now live from Istanbul. Ivan, what is the situation now as we speak? I hear a lot of commotion behind you.
Well, here in Taksim, the scene is pretty festive right now. I don't know if you can see behind me the crowd here. We're hearing music and drums. Somebody lit a bonfire. There have been some fireworks as well taking place here. Not far away from here, there are still demonstrators clashing with riot police in the direction of the Prime Minister's office in Istanbul. And we've gotten some details, some facts from the Turkish Interior Minister via the official Anatolian agency. He came out saying that about 939 people have been detained, that 53 citizens have been wounded since these protests started, 1 critically, and that 26 security forces have been wounded. And this is interesting. He said that there have been protests in 30 of Turkey's 81 provinces over the course of the last 3 days. That shows you how quickly what started as a handful of people trying to protect this park here in Istanbul from being demolished, what started as a very small, peaceful sit-in has blossomed into something that is creating unrest in a number of different Turkish cities and provinces. We've talked to a number of residents of the Turkish capital, Ankara, to the east of here, and they're describing running clashes between riot police and demonstrators in the neighborhood of Kizilay. It's not really clear what the demonstrators want. This has erupted in just a matter of 36 hours, but the chant we're hearing again and again from the crowd behind me, Relitsa, is resign Tayyip. That's the Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Relitsa?
Ivan, what can you tell us about the protesters? Who are they? How much support do they have?
I can say here in Istanbul, the crowd is predominantly secular, but it does run through a cross-current of different ideologies. For instance, we've seen members of a pro-Kurdish party side by side with members of one of the main secular opposition parties.